45?
All right.
Yeah,
Let's go to YouTube.
Yeah.
And then there you can
Go
see
live?
live.
I go pick up my vehicle. 6 hours.
Yay!
All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Well, since we're live, we're gonna get this rolling.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, if you're ready, then go ahead.
Well, only ready with this thing.
Well, that's not what I was talking about, and you know that's not what I was talking about. Are you gonna recite? You need to recite at least a few lines of that very heart wrenching and tender ode that you put together for Greek, right? All right, fine. If you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it for you. What's the line that really just grabs you the most? Ben, what's your favorite line?
My favorite.
Ben, I want you to read. Tell me a couple of your favorite lines, and then we'll read it from here.
To talk about those. Have you not made us one flesh yet in this glass illumination word? We walk at different paces.
Yeah. And I gotta tell you, I've seen a lot of songs, poems on many different subjects. This is the first one. One's apprehension of the Greek language in class like this. I'm not sure how to feel about that, but I think I feel something.
Forgive me, it took me a minute to remember what you were talking about. I was like, does everybody know that? I don't know.
How could you forget? All right, so we'll get started. Who wants to lift up a word to get us going today? Tommy, I think it's you.
I thought I spoke enough yesterday.
Oh no, you need to continue on and lift up a word of prayer for us.
All right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful, blessed time. I pray that you bless our studies, fill our hearts with your Spirit as we seek the glory of your Son through the words of your original language and how they were written. Bless this class and lead us and guide us by your Spirit. Amen.
Amen. All right, so did everybody do the quizzes and exercises this week?
I did the quiz, I
Okay.
Okay.
Ben, are you caught up?
I'm almost caught up. I was working on all of 4 this week.
All right.
Yeah. Like I said, I didn't get through all the exercises on 4. I think I did them all before and the quiz. I took the quiz just before I came over here for chapter 4. But
Okay. All right. So try to stick with it. I think the most important thing is more important than actually the performance of it is the practice of it.
yeah.
So I don't want anybody to be intimidated by the performance piece of it and not miss the practice piece of it, because with the practice piece will come the performance. We're going to just do a little bit of review to get started. So we were talking about the second declension masculine form last week, and why don't we read it through all together? So nominative first person singular, halagos. Yeah, and actually I'm going to switch right over to the more modified Erasmian. So yeah, you're going to find me oftentimes pronouncing this like the back vowel because that's just how I learned it. But I'm trying to teach you the way that with the back vowel that is the Erasmian. But all of this is modified Erasmian. We know this isn't really exactly how Erasmus was suggesting that everybody needs to pronounce these things. But so now most people nowadays will use the front vowel O, right? Rounded front vowel. So ho-logos, right? Or you could say, some people will say, because of the rough reading mark, ho-logos or ha-logos. I'm just trying to, I want to learn the pronunciation that you're going to hear from others. So the pronunciation you're most likely to hear now would be something like hologos or ha logos. Okay, and if you see that I'm slipping back into my I won't say my old ways. I guess actually that's probably right. Then you can catch me on that. So once again, let's start with nominative singular, ha logos.
Ha logos.
Genitive singular, tu logu.
To logo.
Dative singular, to logo.
To logo.
Accusative singular, ton logon.
To logo.
Nominative plural, hoi logoi.
Hoi logo.
Genitive plural, ton logon.
To logo.
Dative plural, tois logos.
Tois logos.
Accusative plural, tus logus.
Tus logos.
There we go. And then the neuter, so nominative singular, to technon. Yes, so nominative singular, to technon. To technon. Okay, genitive singular, to techno.
To techno.
Dative singular, to techno.
To techno.
Accusative singular, to technon.
To techno.
Nominative plural, ta techna.
Ta techno.
Genitive plural, ton technon.
To techno.
Dative plural, tois technois.
Tois technos.
Accusative plural, ta techna.
Ta techno.
All right, very good. Very good. So a lot of memorization up front. As time goes on, there'll be less. It'll be more about reading. But the paradigm nouns here that we just read in the second declension, the masculine was logos, in the neuter it was technon. Very important to memorize those so that you can apply them to other nouns that are in the same declension. All right, so this week we're talking verbs. First, we're going to give a little bit of an overview. So I told you my presentation, I adapted largely from Plummer, so I will make no secret about that. And so you'll notice a few differences even on the first slide here. I think you should also read through the slides that are from Plummer. There's nothing that I would say is inaccurate about them. There's just a few areas where I would state things a little bit differently. And you might actually learn from seeing how he presents the material and how I present the material. So I want you to see it as complementary. Especially with verbs, I found a few areas where I felt like I wanted to adapt it a little bit. So let's start talking first about English. So English verbs usually need helper words if you want to try to understand time and meaning. Right? So in English, if you have a verb like hunting, the word hunting itself, in most contexts, does not tell you anything about time. Did it happen in the past? Is it the present? Is it the future? Is it something that happened in the past and now we're experiencing a present result as a result of that action? That can actually be the case, though, in some contexts. So, for instance, if I see someone who's coming out of the woods holding a rifle, and I said this single word, hunting, like as a question, you can infer that I am asking that question in the present tense. So that's not always true, that English verbs need auxiliaries, but oftentimes they do. So when we say I am hunting, the auxiliary am tells you that it's something that's happening right now, right? Whereas if I were to say I hunt, like, hey, maybe 3 times a year I hunt, or 3 times a month I hunt, I could be communicating something like continual action, right? So although we say even in English that we talk about a present tense, exactly what kind of time is communicated depends oftentimes on the context and also by the conjugation, right? If we have, and the lack of or the presence of these auxiliaries. That's my hunting rifle in there. It wasn't really necessary for me to replace whoever that cartoon figure was on it. Did you look at these? There's a cartoon figure. There was a cartoon figure there of somebody holding a rifle.
Oh.
And I just could not allow that.
I vaguely remember it, but not really.
Yeah, I could not allow that to make its way into my slides. So I just have a picture there of my hunting rifle, which is a T3X. That's a 300 Win Mag, and
Tikka's a good brand.
Tikka's it's a Finnish make.
Very nice bolt action.
Very great, great bolt action rifle, and I have some nice glass on it from a Czech glass company too. So, of extreme relevance to this class, I want you to know I was supposed to be going on an elk hunt, third rifle in November. But my friend pulled out of it, so I think I'm going to be going pheasant hunting instead. All right, so now I had a chance.
I think that's the wrong gun for pheasant.
No, that's why I actually am getting a shotgun now. It's like five shot with one in the chambers, like 28-inch barrel, and
I forgot you can have more shots. I grew up in California, and you could only have 3 in the.
Yeah. You can only have 3 in like the magazine.
In the tube.
Yeah. Or in the tube. Yeah. Right. Okay. Okay. Well, that was really important for me to say and talk about. Since it's gonna have
hunted, I am hunting. I will hunt.
No, it was actually just an opportunity for me to talk about my hunting rifle. All right. So verbs in Greek, you could say that they're compact. I mean, that's sort of a qualitative way of describing the fact that a single word in Greek can communicate quite a bit of information. So this is the word that means we release. You'll see this as luo is the paradigm verb, luo, which oftentimes is glossed as we or I loose. I loose. So luomen means we release or we loose. And that ending, omicron, mu, epsilon, nu, communicates that it's a first person plural, we. So luomen means we release. So verb endings then can express the person, first person, right? Number, plural. The voice, which in this case happens to be active. The mood, which in this case happens to be indicative. And we'll get into the meanings of these. Grammar wasn't your forte. We'll get into it. And then the tense aspect. We'll talk about tense aspect, but the tense aspect has to do with the perspective of how you look at an event. Do you look at it as a whole, something that is complete, or do you look at it as something that's progressing and happening? Do you look at the beginning of the event, the middle of the event, the end of the event? So we'll get into that now. So person then refers to the subject of the verbal idea, right? So we've talked about this a little bit now, but just to review. So the first person then, there's either first person singular or first person plural, right? I or we in English, second person, we use the same word you, but that can actually be singular or it can be plural. In earlier modern English, there was a distinction between second person singular and second person plural, at least in some registers. We talked about registers of the language as having to do with how speech is communicated in certain contexts, social settings, more formal typically versus less formal. In early English, early modern English, you had, for instance, the word ye, which was the second person plural, as opposed to you or thou, right? So thou was the higher register, and that's the language that you find, for instance, in the King James Bible or early English translations. You would see that. Third person, singular, he, she, or it, or third person, plural, they. Okay, so that's person. And, first person is yourself, the subject who's speaking. Second person, the subject is being spoken to. Third person, the subject is being spoken about. So third person would be talking about somebody could be present, may not be present there. He, she, it, or they. And then number again. So singular versus plural. I, we. Again in English, you, both you singular, you plural. He, she, or it, and they. So far, so good? Okay, and moving a little faster then. So voice. Voice is the way that the subject, you could say, relates to the action that, or the state that's expressed by the verb. And this is an area that has evolved in terms of our understanding of Greek, particularly over the last, say, 20 to 30 years. The active voice refers to the subject performing the action. Right? I place the book, right? I hit the ball, right? It's active. The subject is doing the action. And then passive is receiving the action. So I was hit by the ball, right? That's a passive thing. So even though the subject is I, it's not the subject who's actually doing the action. Now middle is the area that has evolved quite a bit in terms of the consensus opinion on its meaning. In older grammars, you'll see the language of deponency. So if you read chapter 4 in Plummer, you'll see that deponent comes from the Latin word depono, meaning to put away. And the assumption in the older grammars is that some Greek verbs used to have an active form and a middle form, and then at some point the active form was retired or put away. And so these are called deponent verbs in the older grammars. There have been more sophisticated and more comprehensive analyses of the middle voice in the last few decades, and so we're going to take a look at what the fruits of those studies are. First, the active voice. Active voices can be either transitive, and if I'm going too fast or slow, let me know. I'm sort of assuming you have some familiarity with these concepts, but we can slow down if we need to. So transitive means that the subject of the verb is doing the action, and then there's a direct object of that action. So, I see a tree, I hit a ball, I find a friend. Okay, intransitive, there is no direct object, right? So, I'm walking, I'm thinking, I'm daydreaming, right? There's no direct object. So those are intransitive. And so here's an example of a sentence where the verb is in the active voice and it's transitive. So, agapesin ha theos ton kosmon. Okay, so we can actually say that together. Agapesin ha theos ton kosmon. And I told you you're still going to have to try to catch me because I do want to standardize on the pronunciation of that omicron. So one more time, agapesin ho theos ton kosmon. Okay?
I just got in the middle when English starts in the beginning.
Right. So we talked a little bit about how Greek is a highly inflected language, meaning that the endings on the verbs, they tell us a lot of information about what's happening. So when I look at, this for agape sin, we'll find out that this is actually telling me that it's a third person singular. And when I look at ho theos, I can see it and say, okay, this is a nominative singular because of the way that it is declined. So that's why we're learning these paradigms, Tommy. So I can look at like this word theos and I can know that this is the subject. Now if it said ton theon, right, then I would know that that is the object, not the subject, right? So that allows Greek to be freer in the word order. So languages that have like more information that's communicated by nouns can allow you to have more flexible word orders. So in English, if we want to communicate, I hit the ball, the word order is important. But in Greek, the word order is flexible. Now you tend to see the verb come first, then the subject, then the object, but it doesn't always have to be that way. You can see any combination.
What is a really long word again? That starts with the eta.
That's a conjugation of the word agapao, which means to love. So we're gonna see that. But what we want to look at here, it was because at this point we're just looking at the voice. God loved the world, right? So God is the subject, right? So when you look at a Greek sentence, you don't look at the first word and say, oh, that has to be the subject. You look for the word that is declined in the nominative singular, that has inflection on it, right? It's nominative singular, and that word is theos, right? And then the article, the definite article that's right before it, ha, or ho, right? So ho theos. Okay.
Which one is the declined one? The first one?
Declining or declension has to do with nouns. So ho theos, that's declined as a nominative singular. Okay? It's a nominative singular. Ton kosmon, the world, that's declined as an accusative singular, right? It's the object, right? So when you read God loved the world, what's the object? World, right? And you can see by the ending with that Omicron noon, you know that it is an accusative. Make sense? Okay?
So the world is masculine.
Yes. However, we're going to see that there's some exceptions where, you may have, if you're saying, I think what you're trying to say is that there's a paradigm, and you're trying to match that to a paradigm, right? But what we'll find is that there will be some exceptions with the gender. You're not typically going to be confused with that as long as you just memorize like what the masculine second declension is going to be like, and then you're going to see it and it'll be like a feminine one. You'll be like, oh, okay, but I can still look at the endings and it's going to tell me, that is an accusative or it's a nominative, right? Okay. So active voice, the subject of the verb does the action. Nibble voice. So this is where there's been really quite a bit of change in our understanding of the Greek language. Again, traditional grammars look at the middle voice typically in a reflexive way, meaning I do something to myself, where you would add the word myself into a sentence, like again, it could be anything. I hit myself. I confused myself. Whatever it is, that's reflexive action, right? Where you're the object of the verb itself. In Greek, the reflexive sense in the middle is actually pretty rare. You will find examples of reflexive action. I spoke to myself, right? That sort of thing. You can see examples of the reflexive use of the middle, but you don't often see that. So that's not the primary meaning of the middle voice, okay? But it is one of them. Here you can see a middle verb, perizosistai, right? And it means he will dress himself. And later on you're going to learn that sigma towards the end of the word is the signal to you. It is a bound morpheme that indicates the future, but you don't need to know that right now. So he will dress himself, and that is the reflexive use of the middle, right? It's just something that you're doing to yourself. Then there's a category which Palmer and Merkel calls special interest. This is also not a very common use of the middle in Koine Greek, but you do find examples. In this usage, the subject has some sort of benefit from what is being done. So I bought something for myself. I saw to it that I would, it doesn't always have to have myself even in it. I saw to it that I would make sure I got the directions to go where I needed to go. There's always this some reference to self, and especially a benefit to self. There are some examples of this in Greek, and they're not infrequent, but they're still not the most frequent use of the middle. So in this example here, panta hosa pros eucheste kai aiteste. All things you pray and ask for. Okay? You can see that the things that you're praying for have some reference to you. Even if you're not praying for them specifically for yourself, you are praying for them so that they might be realized because of something that you did, which is praying. So there's a reference or special interest. And you do see some examples of the middle in Greek. So this is one of them. Now you're not going to remember all of these different uses today, and that's okay. I want to give you some exposure to them, and then the more important thing is for you to practice and spend some time in the Greek, and then you'll quickly catch on to the different types of uses in the middle. So think of this as just an exposure point today to all these different categories, but they don't need to be strictly memorized. I just want you to understand the verbal landscape that relates to the middle. Here's a few other ones. So we did talk about the reflexive use, or the sort of kind of special interest, and there's also reciprocity. So for instance, the word apokrinomai, which means to answer. There's the implication that someone already said something to you, and then as a result of that, you're answering someone, right? So there's a reciprocity. There's a reciprocal statement that's made. Someone says something to you, you say something to them, okay? Dekomai is used as an example here. I don't see it myself, actually, because I think you can receive something. The reciprocity is sort of a broader concept, because in this sense I would see it as reference to a third party, might be a better way to say it. So when you receive something, it's not possible for you to receive something unless someone gives you something, right? So there's that sense of it, and oftentimes when that's the case, you'll see the use of the middle. And then there's movement words. So the broad category, and this is probably where I should have started the discussion, where modern grammar see the middle, to put it into one catch-all, would be what they call subject affectedness. right? So that's the broad category. It affects the subject in some way, subject affectedness. And these are all subcategories that relate to that broader understanding. Movement would be included in that because I am in one place and I'm going to another place, right? Does it affect me? Of course it affects me, right? I was someplace and now I'm in this place, right? Does that affect me? Yes, it does, right? So erikomai, to go, poriuomai, to come, and then self-involvement. So there's words that involve deliberation of some sort, like logistomai, which means to think or to consider or to reckon, or bulamai, which means I wish, right? So there's some reference to yourself that's included in the verb, right? And then the change of state. So the subject does not choose or cannot refuse to be like the subject that's involved in the action. So when I say like I become, right? Like, if you become older, you are not doing anything, it's passively happening. Although it's stated in the English in a active sense, right? It's actually something that is a passive occurrence that you don't really, or to say like you can't refuse that action, So ginomai would be an example of that. I become. So again, these are all just uses of the middle. So when you see the middle and you're trying to understand what's happening, you can ask, just remember this broad category. Subject affectedness, right? Like somehow affects you, it's for your benefit, it involves something you do in response to someone else. It revolves around something physically that involves you moving from one location to another. It can involve it can involve something where you are thinking or deliberating about something, and so the entire action of the verb involves you. So those are some of the examples we find. Now the passive voice. The subject of the verb then receives the action, and I just want to say, because this is a small class, because we can move faster here. Does everyone understand the difference between active and passive? Do we need to take more time on this? No? Okay. Yeah. So as we stated, the subject is the one that's doing the action, active voice. Passive, it's happening to the subject. Here's examples from the Greek. The first example, therapiue, tein gunaika. Let's all say that together. Therapiue, tein gunaika. Tommy? Therapiue, tein gunaika. Good. Therapiue, tein gunaika. You got it. All right, he's healing the woman. Although I'll tell you right away that active, it's translated as is healing. It could potentially be he heals the woman. So there's some sense of it happening in the present, but it's certainly active. And then the passive voice, he gune therapiuetai, so we can say that together. He gune therapiuetai. Tommy, he gune? Therapiuetai. Yeah, therapiuetai. Therapiuetai.
Sounds like Greek for therapy.
Thera.
Therapiuetai.
Peuetai. Therapiuetai. Hegune. Therapiuetai. Very good. Yeah, excellent. So that's passive, right? The woman is being healed.
Or just more free with adding lots of vowels on it.
Well, the vowels are long, or the morphemes or these endings are longer. So when you add them together, and then you can, of course, there's augments that can come to at the beginning of a word, infixes or prefixes, and so then when you add it all together, you can end up with some long words.
Peter.
Yes.
Peter.
So oftentimes you'll find that a lot of Greek verbs have intensifiers. These are prepositions that are added to the beginning of the verb, and sometimes they don't necessarily change the translation but they indicate some intensive action, iterative actions, things that happen. They have a sense of just intensifying that action. So they can end up being very long words, for sure. Okay, so active voice, passive voice. And then mood. Okay, so mood is one that we'll spend a little more time on. This is talking again about your perspective on what is happening with the action of the verb. Is it something that is actual? Is it real? Is it something that is imaginary or supposed, right? Or maybe it's something that's might be true, or it's conditional, like it could be true. Is it something that you want to have happen, right? But you know it isn't reality right now. You know, something that you would wish for. Is it something that you're commanding that people do, right? And is it something that you're making like this demand of somebody to say something? So that would be like your imperative. So indicative then is really, and we'll get into this now. Actually, I think I have another slide here. So indicative is something that's factual, right? He went fishing, or will he go fishing? And again, like, is this review for everybody, or
This is new.
This is new?
Partial newing.
some things you know and sometimes you know? Okay, so
let's
let's.
definition real quick.
Yeah, so I actually have this slide with all the definitions in here. So indicative represents something as factual. Okay? It may not actually be factual, right? So if I know I'm lying to you, I can say, my brother is the president of the United States. That's not true. But
As if it was a fact.
that's right. You're representing it as though it's factual.
I meant the definition of mood.
Oh, mood, they're the perspective. Like, how do you look at something in relation to reality? Is it, and you can see that there's actually some gradations, right? You have everything from it is a fact, it is reality, to I think it's real, to it could happen or could be real, to I wish it would be real, right? See how there's a sort of spectrum of abstraction from reality, and that's communicated by these different moods. So indicative, factual; subjunctive, conditional, dependent, supposed, uncertain, right? Optative, I wish, right? That something like that would happen. The optative, by the way, is not used very frequently in Koine Greek, as we'll see. In classical Greek, it is more frequent.
I think one of the things that made mood make sense when I was first studying it was how it can put something like prophecy, make it apparent, right? This is something that is stated to be future, but it is stated in the case of reality. It is indicative. So this is reality, but it hasn't happened yet. It's a future reality. And I think that one was one where I was like, oh, that makes so much sense, because it's like it makes such a big difference where it's like, oh, this is a future hope or wish versus this is a future reality. I think that's where it made the biggest difference to me, so it clicked the most with mood.
Yeah, and and there's it's good to note that you can use the indicative to talk about things that will happen in the future if you're assured that they're going to happen, right? So there's virtually no abstraction from reality,
Right.
Yeah, very good. And some Indo-European languages use the subjunctive mood, which expresses this sort of possibility, conditionality, contingency, more than other languages, like English. So, for instance, Spanish, it's used very frequently. In fact, if I were to say, I wish you, or I would like for you to come over, then the fact that you're indicating that you like or you have some intention for someone to come over is enough of an abstraction from a reality that you would use the subjunctive to talk about it, right? Because it's not something that's actually real, right? And then you come up with some really interesting sorts of combinations of mood too. I want to have a little bit of this discussion to help you kind of understand mood a little bit. So for instance, in Spanish you can say, yo sospecho que él es un ladrón. And that is, I suspect that he is a thief. Okay? Now, I don't know that he's a thief. I suspect he's a thief. The abstraction from reality is expressed by the verb itself, to suspect, right? So actually, the part that says that he is in the indicative, right? Because you've already expressed that doubt, and now you're just saying that I doubt, and then you use the indicative to say that it's this, right? You could say, on the other hand, yo pienso que sea un ladrón. Okay? And now what you're saying is, I think, or you could say, you could say that. Or you're expressing, like, I think that this person is a thief, right? And you may actually use the subjective there, because the idea of thinking is close enough to reality that now you have to use the subjective to talk about him being a thief, right? So my point is to say that mood it can be kind of complex in different languages, and the way that it's expressed. And in some languages, you find it used a lot more than others. Okay. There's also, again, we talked about this sort of, I call it like an abstraction from reality, right? So when you would use certain kinds of time expressions, like when he goes fishing, you might use the subjective there or whenever, because you don't know when exactly someone is going to go fishing, right? So there's a sense of abstraction or kind of irreality. So again, you'll see this now, once we get into reading and more into the exercises, but hopefully this will make it a little bit less jarring when you see some of the examples and you'll wonder why it's in a certain mood. And you can ask yourself, why is this in the indicative mood, or why is this in the subjunctive mood? And then optative, again, we express as a wish or a potential for something, I wish he would go fishing. Imperative, then, the command. Or perhaps a polite request, if you added, like, the word please in English.
Sorry if I close that.
Yeah, sure.
If I had a brew, I'll close mine. Starting to cool.
Getting drafty?
Yeah.
I'm always hot, so
Are you hot right now?
No, not right now. I just always feel warm. So I don't know. But it's like, I could probably start turning into an icebox in here, and then I'll wonder why everyone is frozen and stopping. It's no longer responding.
It's the Scandinavian blood.
It must be, yeah. Okay, so again, like, this is a very, very terse sort of, summarized discussion of some key aspects of verbs: person, number, voice, mood. Some of these, for instance, mood, tense, and aspect, these are ones you're going to ponder on and have to think about for quite a long time until you really get, like, a very good handle on it. You don't need to understand understand it very well in the beginning to productively read in Greek, but as you spend more time translating and reading, you'll get a better sense of the different uses of the different moods and then the different tense and aspects. So tense and aspect, so Greek has 6 tenses, or what you might call tense forms, and they express aspect, and in the indicative, usually time. Okay? We're going to talk about aspect in just a moment, but these are the 6 tense forms. And we're going to go over each one of these in depth, so I don't expect that you're going to memorize each of these right now, certainly not all the paradigm forms. But you have the present, luo. So luo, you'll see, is used a lot as a paradigm verb because it's very regular. Luo, again, I release or I am loosing. The imperfect of that, do you notice how there's an epsilon that's called an augment? And that augment indicates that it's in the imperfect form, and that means I was loosing. So it's talking about something that was continual but happening in the past. I was loosing. Future, luso. Remember the sigma that we saw earlier? It was in one of the example verbs. That indicates the future. Luso, I will loose. Aorist, you can see the augment again, prefixed to luo. So we have elusa, and the difference between the imperfect eluon and the aorist elusa is just the ending, right? So for the imperfect, if you see an omicron nu, then you know that that's an imperfect. For the aorist, you'll see the sigma alpha.
Wait. Sorry, I got distracted writing it down. What were you saying about the omicron or the omicron?
So you'll notice that there's some similarities between some of the tense forms. The pluperfect you are not going to see very often, but we'll get to that. The imperfect, eluon, and the aorist, elusa, differ not in the augment, but only in the ending. So when you see the stem form of that verb, which is the lambda epsilon, then you'll see added to it the omicron nu and an augment of an epsilon. Now you know you're dealing with an imperfect, right?
So the declensions and the tenses are overlap each other.
Yeah, so when you talk about verbs, you can think the ancient grammarians, you decline nouns and you conjugate verbs. So when
The declension is just talking about nouns.
That's right, So it's all changes of endings. When you have changes of endings that signify different meanings, then when you're talking about nouns, you call those declensions. When you're talking about verbs, as in this case, you're talking about conjugation. Okay? So say again.
Conjugation is tenses, and they still change the ending, just like the nouns you're talking about.
Most of the time, except when it adds the augment at the beginning.
Ask me that question one more time. I want to make sure I understood
So
what you're saying.
conjugations and declensions both involve the changing of the ending, but as Ben just suggested, conjugation can also include the changing of the beginning.
That's right, yeah. And not just the beginning, it can be sometimes instead of a prefixed augment, it can also be an infixed augment. So remember when we were talking about how there's intensifying forms? Where you would add a preposition to the beginning of a verb, you'll see that sometimes the augment will show up between the preposition and the verb form.
They'll cram it all into one word.
Yeah.
Now I'm starting to understand why these words are so
Long.
Yeah.
I'm like, what? That's like 3 letters.
Okay. So tense. So for tenses, again, present. I am in the most simple sense, or I do. Imperfect, I was doing something. Future, I will do something. Aorist, oftentimes can be the simple past, but it can also be the present. And so that's when we start talking about aspects. So hang with me for I think about one more slide, and then we'll start talking about aspects. So that's surprising and confusing. And in the older grammars, you'll see a heavy emphasis on tense, meaning the time. And they will treat the aorist as the simple past. In fact, many examples of the aorist actually relate to the present. And so the primary difference between the present and the aorist is not, in fact, time. It's aspect. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And then there's perfect. So the perfect, and you can see that there is what they call reduplication. So instead of the stem to the vowel being, which is lambda, epsilon, you have that lambda and then an epsilon after it, and then the stem, right? So from luo to leluca, right? And then, of course, the change in the ending, the change in the conjugation, including the kappa alpha, right? And then the pluperfect, I had released or I had loose. And again, this is pretty uncommon, but it would be the augment, it would be the duplicated form, and then it would be the stem, and then it would be a kappa, and then a different ending.
So these changes, are these all the same across the board for any word? Or just for this word?
Good question. It is pretty much the same for every verb, but there are some irregular verbs. The most important one is one we're going to learn this week, which is ame, which means I am. Also, and I didn't think about this ahead of time, but I think it's important to point out that the reduplication of the stem consonants for luo, you can see that it's a lambda, but that's because the first consonant is a lambda, right? In other perfect words, if the first consonant is another consonant, that's the one that you're going to
like if it's a delta,
reduplicate.
Epsilon delta.
Yeah.
Delta rather than epsilon lambda, epsilon lambda.
That's right. So
it would behoove me to memorize the declensions and this.
Yes, you definitely are going to want to memorize like the tense forms, these 6 tense forms with this paradigm verb of luo. And then you're still going to struggle here and there for a while to adapt the paradigm to others that you're going to encounter, but you'll quickly catch on.
The endings pretty much will stay the same through most of the verbs, like you see here. It's that only that beginning part that will duplicate according to the root word.
It's kind of like Tagalog, the Filipino national
Is it
language.
really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Like, for example, eat. Eat is kain. There's kakain, which is future. Kumakain, which is I am eating.
Oh.
It's kind of...
Yeah. So in Tagalog, actually, the tense of the verb is actually prefixed, not suffixed, not put at the end, right? Okay. So.
Or sometimes they put a suffix like kakainin, like in the future.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Interesting.
So in Hebrew, there's 2 major verb forms, and one of them, the change in person is indicated by a prefix, not by the suffix. Okay, so it's just depends. Even within a language, it can change, because then the other major form in Hebrew, the change in number and person is indicated by changes in the suffix. Yeah. So, yeah, it just depends on the language, and even within the language it can be different. Okay, so let's start talking about aspects. And again, I just want to emphasize again, we're not going to master aspects in one short conversation because there's many different nuances to it, and there's even a few differences between what certain scholars might say about aspect and the way that they would characterize it. So I want to keep my comments contained really to the areas where there's consensus, and then point the way forward a little bit where there may be some opportunities for us just to continue to grow in our understanding of it. So let's go back actually for a second to, let's see, we talked about the middle voice, we talked about mood.
So these like voices and tenses, is this the third declension you were talking about last week?
No. Third declension, don't worry about the third declension. Once you learn the first and second declension nouns, which we have, then third declension is pretty easy. You'll see. But it would complicate things a little bit too much right now to bring it in. There are some grammars that actually just go through every noun form first and then teach you the verbs. I think it's better for you to learn the verbs early so that you can start reading and translating, and then introduce more of the noun forms later. So we talked about perspective. Okay, remember with mood, what is the perspective that we're talking about? The perspective we're talking about is how much does an action adhere to reality? How much does it have in common with actual facts, and how much abstraction is there from that perceived reality, right, or represented reality? Now, when we talk about tense and aspect, because tense and aspect really come together in Greek, verbs will have some, in the case of like the indicative, have some aspect of tense, like it's happening right now, but mostly they will have aspect. And so you can think of it as sort of a continuum of tense and aspect, with some communication of a temporal idea, a time idea, right? But mostly a communication of a perspective or a viewpoint, a decision to look at something and communicate something about the verb in terms of either a process, something that's ongoing, or it's completed, or you're looking at it in terms of its beginning or its end, or you could look at it as something that is a whole, so you're not focusing on the beginning, the middle, the end, you're looking at it all together. It's holistic, right? Or you could look at something that talks about what is the reality right now because of something that happened in the past, right? And now it still is now. For instance, we could say he has grown into a very tall young man, right? When did the growing happen? In the past. What is the present reality as a result of what happened in the past? He is tall. Make sense? So we communicate that in that fashion in English. Okay. In Greek, the imperfective aspect, okay, and it would make sense when you kind of break this down. It's not perfect or complete, right? It's imperfective. Talks about something that is continually happening, something that's ongoing. There's no completion to that action yet, right? But you're not talking about something that the beginning of it, you're not talking about the end of it, you're just focusing on the fact that it is ongoing. It's continuing. That's imperfective. So the imperfective aspect is communicated by the present tense. So remember, we said luo could be, I am loosing or I am releasing, right? It's an action that continues. It hasn't completed yet. We're not talking about it just starting either, right? So I didn't say I started to release. I didn't say that, right? I said I am releasing. Okay, so it's action that's ongoing. Make sense, Tommy?
Yeah.
And then the imperfect tense, as you might guess, also depicts an action as ongoing. Now, an imperfect tense is telling us something about something that was happening in the past, right? I was growing, right? So think about like action like this. In English, we can say, I have grown, right? So I grew in the past, and now as a result of what happened in the past, I'm grown, right? And that would be a perfect aspect. You could say, I grew, right? You're not focusing on the fact that it, I don't think you can't say that you grew without it conveying the fact that it happened in the past. But I'm not talking about it continually happening right now, ongoing. I'm not talking about the start of it, or I finished growing, or I grew up. We often use these, what they would call free morphemes or particles in English, like grew up, or I finished up, or I ate up, right? And that kind of focuses on the fact that it's consumed or completed, right? I'm just saying I grew. You're looking at the whole thing, right? And then that's the perfective aspect, right? Okay, or it could be imperfective, and again, it doesn't matter when it's happening, it matters the fact that it's continuing. I was eating is something that went on for a period of time in the past, right? I am eating, it's something that's happening right now, but it's continuing. Okay? So that's imperfective aspect, and that's communicated in Greek by the present tense and the imperfect tense. Present tense and imperfect tense. Perfective aspect, where you're looking at something as a whole, something is complete, it's a single event. That's communicated by the aorist. Okay? Let's go back to one example.
I got a question.
Yeah.
1 John 1:9. Is that imperfect or aorist tense?
I would have to look, but let me show you this first, just so that we can keep that thought, and maybe this will make a little bit more sense now. Remember this example? God loved the world. Okay. That is in the aorist tense. Okay. Now, it could be talking about something that happened in the past, but you could also use this expression to talk about something that's true, generally. It would also be true in the present. So I'm looking at the love of God. It's not when God started loving or ended loving, or that he's, continuing in this process of love. It's just that God loves or loved, right? And that's what's expressed by the aorist.
Which part of the word shows the aorist tense?
The aorist tense is going to be, it's indicated by the augment, and we'll get into this, but in this case, wish this thing, should point to stuff here, but you can see the eta there. That's actually the augment, and because this was an alpha, when you add the epsilon, remember the epsilon? Remember the epsilon augment? You add that together, you get an eta. Okay? It's also shown by the conjugation at the end. But the point that I want to make again is, theoretically, technically, this aorist could refer to both something in the past, that, God loved the world, or something in the present, God loves the world, right? Now, here's where it gets a little bit complicated, and where you just have to it's almost like juggling plates a little bit. So when you encounter an aorist, you need to say, what's being communicated most, right? Or more, I should say. And maybe I'll help if I just draw this a little bit. So remember we said that in Greek, we call these, as many grammarians do, tense forms, which is to say that what's communicated isn't simply the traditional understanding of tense, which is a temporal or a time idea, but there's more to it than that. And in fact, it also communicates aspect. And aspect, again, is how we look at those events, how we frame it. Do we frame it as a whole, like an aorist, right? We look at it as a complete event, a single event, something, or do we look at it as something that's continuing, or you could look at it as something that's iterative, that is done repeatedly, right? And in fact, in Hebrew, there's a tense that communicates that iterative idea, among other things. So aspect then is, perspective. So when you look at the aorist now, you need to think, and when you actually look at any Greek verb, to start with that, you need to think of first the aspect and then the time. Okay? Because most of the time when you are looking at a Greek verb and you look at the tense form of it, it's telling you how does the speaker look at that event. And that's something that takes us a little while to kind of unpack and understand. Because, again, most Indo-European languages don't have heavy markedness, as linguists would call it, for aspect. Tenses in English are primarily indicators of time. Present tense, past tense, future. I will do something.
Philosophical language.
It's just a different way of communicating and framing events. It's not that any language is any less capable or more capable. It's just how that deep structure of language expresses itself and comes to the surface. Right?
So would you say that Greek is more complicated than English, or the other way around?
Well, I wouldn't say that any language is necessarily more complicated than any other language. That languages just have different ways of communicating. Different aspects of language, or different components of language, if you will. Tense and time and person and number and mood. Mood, the way that you think about something. Is it real? Is it not real? Is it something that happened in the past? Is it something that happened in the future? Tense. So languages have different ways of communicating that, and there may be more sophisticated contextual cues in some languages that might be harder to pick up and could actually be, you might think that the grammar itself looks very simple, but then some of this information might be communicated and encoded in more sophisticated ways in some languages. Greek just happens to communicate information through conjugations. So you see a lot. You see, subject and the, person, number, voice, all these things. I mean, you can see this in a verb, whereas in some other languages, you might have to pull that from some subtle cues in the context or from the use of other, like, discourse markers or particles. Perhaps it's the combination of that and then the word order in some languages, so it really just depends.
Greek lends itself to being more specific, right? Is what it feels like.
Like the rules in English are very inconsistent. If you're not a native English speaker, you would find it hard
So those are two separate things. So what Ben is talking about, is it more specific? It communicates more information through individual words. So that is true. It is more compact in that sense. but it's not necessarily more sophisticated. English and other languages have ways of communicating how people look at events and in terms of aspect, but just do it in different ways. And then as far as like the regularity, yes, it's true that there are some languages that are pretty regular, and Greek is pretty regular. There's only a handful of irregular verbs, but what we find is that there's a pattern in many languages that they start with heavy inflection and irregularity, and then over time they tend to simplify. And that actually has been the case with Greek. So that in modern Greek, for instance, we see very little use of the dative case, for example. So you tend over time to see simplifications of grammar and also conjugation and inflection as well. All right. So
Southern slang.
All right. Now I know again, like this lesson I think is less tangible. It's more ideational, kind of more notional than some of the other lessons that we've had. And I want to, as I've said several times already, realize that you're not going to imbibe all of this all at once, but this is just to give you sort of an overall perspective or view of how the Greek verb system works and how it communicates information. All right, and then so we're going to start with like the first verb paradigm that is irregular, and that's ame. You can see that English is also very irregular. And this is what is known as a copulative verb. Okay, so copulative verbs do not take direct objects. They take predicates. So you have like the verb, you have the subject and then you have the predicate. So the subject would be, for instance, in the word I would be the subject, and then am would be the predicate. Because you're not talking about an action that's done to someone, you're talking about a state of being.
So the predicate is a state of being.
Predicate has a more general meaning than that. So you can talk about, like, for any sentence, you can talk about the subject and then the predicate. So the subject is the person, and then everything else, the verbal idea, and everything that modifies the verbal idea is the predicate. So I, subject, am, predicate. Or I am going to the conference that involves 15 nuclear scientists and is going to be concurrently live streamed across the globe next week while I also visit, and whatever else, that's the predicate, right? So the predicate is the verbal idea, and the verbal idea can include a copulative like this where there's no direct object, or it can include a verb that has a direct object, which would be transitive, or a verb that expresses action in some way that could be intransitive. Okay, so I went ahead of what we were supposed to talk about. So it's just saying the same thing. You have a complement, and then you can talk about a predicate. So we talk about like a predicate nominative. A predicate nominative would be, so if I am a teacher, you can talk about the word teacher is. Am a teacher is the predicate, and then the predicate nominative is teacher. So I, subject, am a teacher, predicate, teacher, predicate nominative. So that's the terminology. You don't need to, just be aware of it. You'll see it in the grammars. And then that could also be an adjective. It looks like I have an example here for that too. they are good. So they, subject, are good, predicate, adjective, as opposed to predicate, nominative. And then here it is. So as always, let's run through this paradigm. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna actually say the entire paradigm this time, and then you're gonna say it with me. So the first person singular of ame, because ame is the lexical form, the first person singular is going to be the same, right? So ame. Second person singular, a. Third person singular, estin, or in a very few cases, este, without the noon at the end. First person plural, esmen. Second person plural, este. Third person plural, asin. Okay? And likewise, that final nu in the third person plural, occasionally you will see a sit instead of a sin, but there's not very many instances of that.
This is a conjugation, not an inflection.
This is a conjugation, because that's correct. Because we are inflecting or changing the ending of a verb and not a noun.
Are you just going easy on this one with the first, second, and third person?
In easy in what sense? So this is the paradigm.
Well,
So
there's 6 tenses, right?
yes, but what you're learning right now is just okay, I see what you mean. Yes, we're just learning the present indicative of ame. Okay. So as we get into this, you'll find that you'll have the aorist, you'll have an imperfect form. There's a future form.
And you will have 6 of each of those.
Oh, the present indicative is just the first of the 6.
Yes.
And there's 3 variations of the first.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm...
Well, yeah,
Yes.
like there's.
So there would be 36 different ways to say this, depending on how it declines or how it.
How am I supposed to memorize that?
You're going to find a lot of similarity between the forms.
And some of them are almost never used.
Right.
So
Yeah.
of the 36, you're only going to see like a dozen of them. Usually.
Yeah, and I wish I could. I mean, there's not. Again, like in the beginning, there is a lot of memorization. I mean, it just is what it is. And we've talked about this a little bit. I think the best thing is just to write it out a few times and then think of a very vivid example in your head of what's happening, right? And use that to etch that in your memory. A lot of other people will use the mnemonics, but I find that I spend a lot of time trying to learn the mnemonic, and then, wait a minute, was it Columbus? He sailed, in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, or was it in 1493 he launched on the high sea? I can't remember, and then so I personally am not a big fan of those mnemonics for that reason, but I am a fan of vivid, imaginative learning, and attaching examples to these, so, I mean, this is, either, you can't learn this the way that a native Greek speaker is going to learn this, but you can emulate some aspects of that learning, even though this is a dead language, essentially, right? Modern Greek is different. This is a dead language. And the way that people learn things is through vivid experiences and through repetition and through context. And sometimes there's production and performance requirements or anxiety that people have because they're being forced to do things and making mistakes. It's been demonstrated that making mistakes is a critical part of language learning. So when you're in a classroom setting like this, you're always trying to get the, quote, correct answer. But actually, that's not how most people learn languages, right? You learn by making mistakes. And So the most important thing is just to keep producing, practicing, thinking through examples, vary the different kinds of examples that you think of, right?
So amu is how you pronounce to be.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah. Present indicative. And so, if you you want to think of something like that's, very vivid, I think of an example of that, So, and you can start to use your vocabulary to help you. So, for instance, with the first person plural, which is esmen, you could, the way I would learn it now, again, I don't even remember now how I learned it. Probably, in many cases, wasn't as imaginative as I should have been and just kept writing it. And that's part of it too. Repetition is a part of it. But you could say, Ben?
Ismin and
Yeah,
I wasn't sure. Kalila.
Okay. We used this example before, so you remember what this means? It was one of the vocabulary items, I believe, where we talked about, not toponyms, but personal names.
Got it?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay, so how do you think so I would remember, think of somebody with you and you're there, right? And I think that's an effective way to be able to learn, right? So for each of these,
we are
Galileans.
or we are in.
Oh, we're in Galilee.
Yeah, right? So imagine yourself there with someone, right? As men. N, right? And then, and then just think of something, like for each one of these, you can think of something similar, right? And then use your vocabulary that you've already learned to also reinforce that while you're doing these verbs. So don't learn these verbs purely in isolation. You follow me?
Yeah.
Come up with examples, and you now actually have sufficient vocabulary from the different lessons to do that. Okay? I haven't looked at time. It's only 7:45. So that's pretty good. We're actually and it looks like we're starting to make better time each week now, which is good, right? And you're picking everything up, so that's exciting. So what we'll probably start doing next week. What's that?
Can you do a brief 1 John 9? Is it Eris? Is it perfect?
We could look at that. I was going to say what we could start doing each week is bring something from the exercises or bring something from your Greek text and let's look at it together. Yes. So we'll have time to do that. So hold that example. We'll do that at the end.
Okay.
Yeah. So hang on to that. And then next time we'll do some stuff at the beginning, right? Because we're going to have enough time. We're going to have time to do a little bit more today. So we will look at John 1:9 and we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about in there. But let's finish up with just the vocabulary here too. So, ago, I lead.
Ago.
Mm-hmm. Lepo. Mm-hmm. I see. I look at. Didasco. I teach. And then Agero. I raise up. Crino.
Crino.
I judge or condemn.
I crino you.
Yeah, that's right. But that's exactly what you want to do when you're trying to do this, right?
Yeah.
So you want to start, and next time we're going to look at the regular conjugations. So it'll start to become much easier for you. But you can start to now come up with scenarios for that.
Can we speed through these 5 one more time?
Yeah, sure. Ago, I lead. Blepo,
Lepo.
I see. What do you see? So this is what, like, if I'm doing this, and I can't remember, this is my classical Greek class. I know this is one of the first nouns I learned. I don't think it's in your vocabulary yet. But what I would say is blepo to employon. And maybe it is. Is this employon in your vocabulary? I can't remember. I don't think it is.
I don't think so.
On. That was okay. Let's try that again. So that means ship or boat, right? So, like one of the most. Remember this one? Oops, sorry. Jesus, which means Tommy.
Jesus.
There you go. This is one of the first sentences that I remember reading in Nation, which was the first Greek grammar I had. And this was back as an undergraduate. And I actually learned quite a Greek on my own because I wanted to read the Bible, New Testament Greek, and I was taking classical Greek. Jesus and Mine is yeah. I actually have decent Greek handwriting, but not when I'm like writing them low like this. So this means boat. This means. And what do you think this is saying? Guess. Jesus, boat. What do you think Jesus did with the boat? Jesus got on, or got into the boat. Right? Okay. So that's a word picture. That's a picture, right? That you can remember from words. And then if I'm learning like blepo, I'm on a ship and I'm on a mast and I'm looking out over the horizon and I see another ship coming up over the horizon. Blepo to employon, right?
You see this shit?
Yeah.
Thanks, show off. Everyone's told us that's
I'm too fixated with I'm trying to find the first letter of Jesus' name. Capital letter. I'm not finding it anywhere in the alphabet.
Iota?
Listen, iota?
It's iota, yeah. So it looks like I. It looks like the English I.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me this thing.
Okay. And here's one that I know was in your vocabulary. So I'm learning ago, and I know that. Do you remember doulos?
Slave.
Spell it, Tommy.
D is in delta.
Delta.
U is in epsilon.
Very close. So it's actually omicron epsilon.
Lambda.
Mm-hmm.
Omicron.
Yes.
And then. Hold on, bear with me. Sigma?
Sigma. Very good. Yeah. Okay, so I'm heartened. I'm actually encouraged to see that You guys are picking this up, and Tommy, you're actually accelerating your learning too. So that's very good.
I've been paying more. I've been doing stuff outside.
Yes, but also too, like we said, the first foreign language you learn, whether it's a living language or dead language, is the hardest one to learn. So if I have ago, and I know that doulos is a slave, I'm going to remember ago doulon or ago doulon. What's that mean?
I bring a slave. I lead a slave.
Right. Okay. So I'm picturing that, and doulos. It probably is best glossed as slave, although it has sort of overtones of the word servant also, and it really just depends on the context. And I think in almost all cases it's translated as slave. So, all right. Very good. So, ago, blepo, didasco, egero.
So that's a capital iota?
Capital A.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm just blind.
And, to learn these things, I would, again, go through your vocabulary or even pick new ones, right? And then picture yourself there. Picture yourself in the first person. What do you see in the first person? Ago. Don't ask me. Just close your eyes. Ago tondulon. What do you see? Answer that for yourself, right? Now imagine yourself in the third person, and you're listening to someone say it, and you're watching him. That's actually how you learn language, right? You don't just produce it yourself. You're watching other people produce it. Okay? You're thinking about it. So come up with those sorts of pictures, and it will help you, right? And not just one, then think of some other ones too. But don't just go through the lists and try to memorize the glosses in English. That's, make it something that you see and feel and touch, and ask yourself, what do you hear? And what does the voice sound like? And what does it smell like? And is it loud or is it soft? That's how you actually learn. And the advantage you have of learning a living language. But try to bring some of that into your learning with the Greek, and it will help you. All right. Meno.
Meno.
Yes, I remain, I abide, I dwell, I stay. I demur. So there's, but all these similar sorts of ideas. Hupago. I go away, I depart. Doulos was actually in the vocabulary for this week. I thought it was in last week. Doulos, slave. Thanatos, death.
Almost sounds like Thanos.
Thanos was the god of death.
Thanatos, I think.
What's that?
Thanatos is the god of death.
Oh, Thanatos. Yeah, Thanos.
Is in...
Yeah,
It
that's.
depends on which country it's from, I think.
Yeah. That I'll actually have to see, because I think that there might have been some additional forms of that. You will find that oftentimes, when you find personal names, this is true in many languages, even the biblical languages like Hebrew, that personal names are derived from and similar but not the same as some of the noun forms. So, yeah. And then Suke, soul or life, Suke. And so, of course, words like psychic, psychology, psychotic, psychoanalyze. All right. Psychic.
Yeah.
All right. And then hora, hour. You can see that the English word is derived from the Greek there. If for weather. Ate, if for weather. Kathos means as or just as. And then hos So again, come up with like simple sentences or simple descriptions, even for some of these conjunctions or particles that might seem like they're very abstract. Autas, host, doulos. Autas, I don't know if this was yet in the vocabulary, I think it was he or it, right? Hosts, like, doulos.
Slave.
Okay.
He's like a slave.
Yes. So somebody who has his freedom but doesn't take his rights very seriously. And you can imagine somebody, think of someone, anyone, right? But like even these vocabulary items, like immediately start thinking of your own scenarios or circumstances, right? Yeah. Things that you've experienced or, that you can imagine vividly. Well, good. So let's see. We made some good time here. So why don't we jump in? And you wanted to look at 1 John 1:9. Is that what it was? Okay. So I'll do that. Okay. En homologomen tas hamartias hemon pistas estin kai dikaias hina aphe humin tas hamartias kai katharise hum hemas apa passes adakias. Why don't we all say it together? Slower, right? Okay, starting. Can you see this or should I make it bigger?
I can see it, doesn't mean I can read it.
Let me make it a little bit bigger. We're looking at verse 9.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm trying to get it all on one page.
Right. I think that's chapter 2.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, it's still across 2 pages. Okay, that's all right. Aeon,
Aeon.
And
homologomen, homologomen, tas, hamartias, hemon, pistas, estin, kai, dikaios, hina, aphe, hemin, tas, hamartias, kai, katharise, hemas, apa, passes, adikias. Not bad at all. That's not bad at all. Let's try that again.
I have no idea what I just said.
That's okay. You actually can pronounce it now, and that's a good thing. The right place, yes. A little faster, and we're going to do it all together now. Aeon homologomen, tas hamartias hemon, pistas estin, kai dikaios, hina aphe, hemin tas hamartias, kai katharise, hemas, apa, Hases adikias. Very good. You're actually doing really well with the reading. So that's excellent. So if we confess or agree, confess our sins ours right here, right? Pistos esteem, faithful he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins, and he will cleanse us from all unrighteousness or all injustices. And the question is,
the cleanse part, is that it? What tense is that?
This is this isn't a subjunctive, so it's okay.
Because it's a whole subjunctive clause, right?
Yes. So here, this clause is beginning with something. So remember, we're talking about kind of like the abstraction from reality, and this is something that is very close to the reality. In fact, it is reality, but it's still conditional, right, on someone doing what? Confessing. If we confess our sins, then, right, he will forgive us. And that's why you're finding these verb forms in the subjunctive. So this is from aphiemi, and that's the subjunctive form, and then the same thing here with katarise. Yeah, so this happens.
MacArthur uses verse to show that because of the tense, it was an ongoing thing. Like we confess because he's cleansing us.
Yeah, what he's talking about is this word right here. So this is the verb, the main verb. Right?
We confess.
Confess. Hamlogamai. And that is in it is in the subjunctive, but it's present tense. And we said about the present tense that present can mean something that's happening like at this moment, right? Like I am hunting, remember? And then we took pains also to say that it could talk about something that is characteristic or ongoing or iterative that happens repeatedly. That could still be the present tense. I hunt, right? I hunt 12 times a month, or I hunt several times a year, right? Or, I hunt when I can. So his point, I'm assuming here, is to say that, the present here represents something that is sort of like a typical present. Present.
Past tense, I hunted, or I sinned and was forgiven my sin. It's as we sin and confess our sin.
Yeah, it's saying that this is something that is something that it's in the present tense, but it's something that we continually will do, right? It's not something that happens just at this moment in time. Yeah, so that's what I would think he's probably making that point. I haven't seen what if you're talking about a commentary, but that would be conveyed, here through the use of the present.
What about the cleansing part? Is that just a conditional? Not conditional, but like an unrelated.
So the whole thing is kind of subjunctive because it's all sort of possibility.
It's all part of a conditional clause, right? So this is a conditional sentence, and you can see they call it the protasis and the apodosis, and that's just the if part and the then part, right? So since those things are not a present reality but are conditional, then they come in the subjunctive. So that's actually a really good example that you brought up, so we can right away see what an example of like a subjunctive usage
Well,
will
the
be.
way that it's being phrased, like the conditional part, like Catholics would love to hear that.
Yeah, but they don't like the rest of the chapter.
In what sense? Like how do you see that?
If we confess our sins, in other words, they use that to say to justify the. You need a priest. You gotta confess your sins. Blah blah. Blah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is part of like the liturgical system.
But like MacArthur's interpretation, I don't remember based on which word he used. But he used it was either the imperfect or the aorist tense of one of the words to show that the cleansing is what was creating the confessing.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, so in the apodosis, this word here is in an aorist tense, and that actually, as we talked about, does talk about something that looks at it holistically. It could be a single event, so I would say that is plausible. Like, that makes sense. If that's how he was arguing, then it makes sense with the verb. Now, you have to be careful sometimes with the interpretation, although I agree with that interpretation because of the rest of the context of both 1 John and the rest of the context of the New Testament. You want to be careful about basing a doctrine like that simply on the tense of one verb here.
He built it largely on verse 7 and continued it into verse 9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that's legitimate. I think that the text gives evidence to that. But again, it's how someone is looking at it. This is where it becomes subtle. But, someone who comes from a sacramental background would say, yes, but here, John is talking about the cleansing. They could argue this. They're looking at all the cleansing that happens in your life from your priestly absolution, and he's looking at it as one of them. I don't know. Textually that doesn't make sense, and contextually that doesn't make sense. But I want you to be aware of what aspect can tell you and what it can't tell you. So sometimes it could reflect a perspective that somebody has. That they're actually looking at all of your sins in your whole life. I'm just trying to tell you this is how someone from a confessional background might argue that. So yes, it does give evidence to that, but you can't rest. Like, you have to be careful not to rest all of your argumentation on the tense argument, right? So you'll get more experience as you go through and translate. Yeah, very good. Any other questions right now? And if not, then I guess we can give it a wrap. All right, so next week, chapter 5. As you have been, just read ahead, try to do the exercises, do your best with the quiz material, and then we'll discuss it when we come back next week. Work on the vocabulary. Like I said, try to craft phrases now as much as you can, not just individual words, but and then create vivid pictures around those words. That will help with the vocabulary. And you're doing really well. I think I can say now, like, we're on track with this. I haven't tested your vocabulary yet, very much except for the quizzes, but I'm really using the quizzes really just to give you practice in addition to the exercises. So it's more about just finishing them. But do commit them, test yourself on the vocabulary, from week to week. And then maybe, I don't know if we'll spend much time in class, but now that we're moving a little bit faster, we might spend a little time doing some more exercises that test vocabulary as well. Yeah, but really good. We're making a lot of progress here, and I think we're actually going to just start speeding up. I don't know if we'll start getting to the point where we actually start going through more than one chapter per week, but we might, because we're starting to pick up the pace here quite a bit.
What do you think we need a help guide?
Yeah, look, I mean, that's great. I mean, anything you do to review, even the most rote exercises of writing it out. And in fact, at this point, you need to do that too. You need to like write stuff out, look at it in charts, review it, write it out again, review it in a chart, think through think through some crazy scenario that you concoct in your head to try to remember something, right? So all those are important. This is exciting. I mean, I'm tempted at this point to go a little bit more in depth in some of these areas, but I think it's all a little bit overwhelming if I do, talk about more about Greek aspect and tenses. You need to spend more time actually doing translation before it will really make sense to do more discuss more around that.
What's the email you need to do? How do I do the proper logos? Because I applied for the academia one and they rejected it.
They rejected it?
Yeah.
Why?
They didn't give a reason. But I'm guessing.
Did you include I just sent them like a picture of something from Front Range. Maybe it was a picture of eCampus. I don't even remember, but they accepted me. I guess they like me better over there. I know that. It's just, but I'm not sure why though.
They asked me what institute, I said Front Range. But I guess I'm wondering I'm wondering about if I'm supposed to put the administrator's email instead of my email.
I don't think so. If you want to look at it, we can look at it together actually if you want.
What's your email thing?
My email?
I was just going to send you that missions conference line.
Yes.
It's both the email and find out.
Bent, V as in Victor, C as in Charlie, at Gmail. So bentvc@gmail.com. Okay. Yeah. So let me do this. We can
I'll email real quick to see what they said.
All right. Yeah. And I'm gonna quit the.
Because we were trying to look at lexicon, and I'm like, I don't have lexicon, and then I got rejected on the email thing.
Praise, what's the best way to kill the live stream at this point? Is it from here or over YouTube?
End stream up there.
Oh, right here. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Cool. I'll see you later. I'm going to go sing it.
All right.
See you guys.
All right.